If you can't dance to the Kari's Corner intro, what can you do? Good morning, everyone. I see Tracy dancing in the background. Tracy's distracting me this morning. Hello, you have stumbled into Kari's Corner. Welcome. If this is your first time here, welcome. I'm so glad that you stumbled into the corner. If this is your 100th time here, super glad to have you back. Please make sure you drop your name in the chat. Let us know who you are and where you're tuning in from. We love our live viewers. We love our replay viewers. I'm so thankful that you guys actually, watch the show and hopefully get some good information out of the show. So today is Thursday, May 23rd here in the United States. If you're in Australia, it's already May 24th. But today is Thursday, and we have hello in the Philippines. Thank you for tuning in. We have a fun-filled, packed show for you today. We have one of my absolute favorite guests, one of my favorite humans who has, I'm telling you people, when she comes on the screen, her backdrop is real. And I'm over here. I'm the green monster of jealousy today. But a few quick announcements before we bring her on. Again, more people in the Philippines. Hey, everybody. A few quick announcements before we bring everybody on. We do have a webinar next Wednesday on one of our featured states, Tennessee. We are featuring the state of Tennessee. There's an old pickup line that's like, are you from Tennessee? Because you're the only 10 I see. Oh, it's horrible. It's a horrible pickup line. Don't use it. Don't use it. But the state of Tennessee, the volunteer state, is being featured next Wednesday on one of our webinars. Abu Dhabi, Zimbabwe, Pakistan. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Nadeem, I think you've been here before. I think I've seen you. I've seen your name. You're starting to become like an Arlene, where I start to recognize these names who are popping up. So thank you guys for tuning in. We do have a position posted for an acute, or maybe it's a couple positions, one position. I can't remember what Tracy said, but there is an acute care pharmacy position, parentheses S, for acute care pharmacy. So if there are any pharmacists out there who are looking for a gig in the United States, please be sure to check that out. I love that Arlene doesn't even just say she's just like, hey y'all, I'm here. I'm Arlene. I'm here every week. I'm a regular. What is up, Arlene? I hope the weather in Jamaica is beautiful. Hello in Qatar and Ghana as well. A couple of people from Ghana. Thank you so much for tuning in. Super, super, super happy for you to be here. Ethiopia. That's super cool. That's really cool. Ethiopia is really cool. Labor Day in Jamaica today. What are you guys doing to celebrate Labor Day? No, wait, don't tell me. I don't want to know. I'll be jealous. That's awesome. Happy Labor Day in Jamaica. That's really cool. And then finally, the Maryland Board of Nursing has caused quite a stir amongst candidates lately. The Maryland Board of Nursing did allow Arlene's pouring salt on the wound. Lovely view too. Of course it is, Arlene. Stop that. Jamaica, give me a break. The Maryland Board of Nursing has caused quite a stir recently because for the time of COVID, they had kind of an emergency legal legislation passed that was around the English language exam and the English language exams that they would accept. And that included the OET, the PTE, and the MET. Being added to their list of accepted exams. Well, that legislation did have a timestamp on it. Hold up, pause. We've never had anyone from Turkey. That's really cool. Hey, Turkey. Hey, Nigeria. Super cool. Thank you so much for tuning in. But so the Maryland Board of Nursing, that legislation ended on April 3rd of this year. So a lot of our candidates are asking, can I still take the PTE to go to Maryland? If you have not taken an English exam yet, then, and you do not have your CES report, and when I say CES report, that is not a Carnegie evaluation. A CES report is a specific report from CGFNS. If you do not have the CES report, if you have not taken an exam yet, then you will be required to take either IELTS or TOEFL if you are going to Maryland. just the state of Maryland. They do have it on their legislation. I'm in close contact. Shout out to Meredith at the PTE and their legal team. They're working really hard to get Maryland to push through adding permanently PTE specifically to their list of accepted exams. So if you are impacted by this, please, please, please reach out to your case manager. Don't panic. You still have time. If you're one of those people, you're in like stage 9B or 10, and you've already taken your PTE prior to that April 3rd date, you're good. Don't panic. Okay. You are good. Don't panic. It's just, this is relevant to the people who took their test or plan on taking their test in the coming days or took their test after April 3rd. Those are the people who are impacted by this legislation. So thank you for summarizing all of that for me, Tracy. I appreciate you. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on today's special guest. You guys know her. You guys love her. She is sorry to everyone else in the recruiting world and the recruiting department. I love you. I appreciate you. But I appreciate Kelsi the most.
Hi, Kari.
Thanks so much. I'm trying to get myself squared up. Yeah, I'm trying to get myself squared up, trying to get the screen figured out. Kelsi and I were talking about all of her books behind her, and she has read a majority of them. Kelsi, if I had to ask you, what is your favorite book?
Oh, Kari, that is such a hard question. You can't ask somebody who loves books what their favorite book is. One of my favorites is a book called Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore. It's set in the city of San Francisco, which I love. And that's probably like my all-time favorite that I've read 100 times. But there's just so many good ones out there.
That is super, super, super cool. Is there a book that if people want to, practice their English, or a good book to practice their reading, what is like something you're reading that you would recommend?
That is a good question. As far as practicing your English, one that I would recommend, actually a series, would probably be the Harry Potter series. I would say it's a pretty accessible series for readers across different levels. I first read it when I was around like 17 or 18, but a lot of people, especially here in the US, that's a book that they read when they're a lot younger. But the great thing about the Harry Potter series is that there's actually movies, which are another great way to practice your English skills. So if there's a series or even a movie series that you're like, oh, maybe I can watch that to help practice my skills, I would say the Harry Potter book or series would be a great place to get started.
That's a really, really excellent option, especially people who plan on taking the IELTS, because it is British literature and they use a lot of British language in the book. And it's in the United States, when you're learning to read, they actually incorporate what are called nonsense words into learning how to read, because it helps you with your phonetic awareness and pronunciation. And Harry Potter's got a lot of those great, like, nonsense kind of words with naming their spells and all the characters. And that's great. Harry Potter is one of my favorites as well. So that's a great suggestion, Kelsi.
Good series. Those are some big books though. They're pretty thick. So, it can be a little bit daunting, but definitely well worth the read.
100%. Another, if you just want to watch a series, one I was thinking of this morning was like Stranger Things. Ooh. I know it's really popular, but it's really cool because you've got a main character who, when the series starts, is in a world that she doesn't know, right? That's so she is kind of like people immigrating to the United States. You are coming into a world you don't know. So you get to watch her learn about this world. But of course she has like really crazy brain powers. But if you're coming over here with really crazy brain powers, that's cool too. Grab some Christmas lights and go to town. The other suggestion I would say would be, of course, it's a Tom Hanks movie. Shout out to Tom Hanks, who never watches the show, but it would be The Terminal.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's someone who comes to the United States, can't speak English, and he gets stuck in the airport. And he learns to speak English by watching the TV show Friends.
Ooh, that's a good example. But with our team here at WorldWide, you won't get stuck in the airport. Don't worry. We'll make sure you get out on the other side.
Exactly. Yes. We're not. Yeah, we will take care of you. Our relocation team is amazing. We're not going to leave you stuck at the airport. So I've got Kelsi on the show today because Kelsi is a recruiter. She works for our amazing recruiting department. And we're going to talk a little bit today about how to specifically prepare for your interview. And how to, look at that, maybe not necessarily the phase of looking at the job offer, but maybe questions to ask in the interview, questions to ask yourself prior to the interview. So the first thing I'm going to bring up for us, Kelsi, is that I introduced Kelsi to this a little while ago, and it's called the CEFR. Your CEFR level. CEFR stands for the Common European Framework Reference. And it basically, I'm trying to bring this image up bigger on my own screen. Basically, what that's going to tell you is, where are you in your language development? This is what all of the tests, PTE, MET, IELTS, TOEFL, TOEIC, this is what they all reference. And if you can actually look on the screen, you see on the far right, you see all of the IELTS band scores and where they are in relation to your CEFR level. Your CEFR level starts with an A1. So that's going to be kind of, you're just introduced to the language. You can't really, you can say hello and goodbye. You don't really understand. You definitely can't write it or read it fluently. But that would be A1, and it moves all the way up to C2. C2 proficiency is people who are fluent. Even IELTS doesn't go all the way up to the highest level, right? So C2 is that you are 100% fluent in that. That's your native speakers, really. That's where you're approaching a native speaker's ability to speak that language. What we are looking for and what your goal should be, if you're doing a self-evaluation of your English skills, you want to be in an upper B2 to a C1. You really want to be in that C1 area. That's called C1 Advanced. And for business higher would be kind of the business language is what you're looking for. As far as education, that's going to be, the courses you've taken in college. That's how they align their courses, is where they're trying to get you to. So that C1 Advanced is what your goal should be as a speaker, as learning to speak. Your Cambridge English level is what the goal is. And that's the equivalent, a C1 is the equivalent of around a 6.5 to a 7.5 in ability level. That's the same for speaking, listening, reading, and writing. All of those things. Some of you, you'll notice when you get score reports back that you're really good at speaking, but you're not really good at the reading portion. So it's going to vary. Your scores are going to vary and be all over the place. You're going to have stronger areas than others. So this is a great reference. If you want to screenshot this, this is a great reference to see where you fall on your language abilities. So Kelsi, why is it important to understand your language abilities prior to a job interview?
Absolutely. So as we know that interviewing for a job in another country or in a different language can be really intimidating. You could be really nervous the first time that you have an interview. Speaking with someone from another country or speaking with someone from in a language that you don't feel fully comfortable with yet can make you feel really nervous. And so what we want to do is prepare you with tools and resources to be able to feel confident going into that interview. And one of those ways that we want to do so is being able to help you identify, okay, where do I fall on this chart? Where is my English level? If I feel like I'm on the lower end, maybe a B2 area, what are some ways that I can improve that before my interview? Of course, the interviewer is going to be looking at your skills and your experience and all of these things, but they also need to be able to communicate with you effectively because you're going to be coming into a new environment. You're going to be going through training and orientation. You're going to be working with coworkers from other countries and from the US. And so you're going to need to be able to communicate effectively. And so Even though you might feel like, well, I have time during the immigration process to improve my English. By the time I get to the U.S., I'll be where I need to be, which is great. We encourage that. We want you to practice during your immigration process, but the interviewers are looking for nurses that are able to communicate effectively. And so, practicing your interview responses and practicing for your interview ahead of time, making sure that you have the tools that you need to succeed in your interview, to be an effective communicator is going to be super important prior to your interview.
I love that. I'm going to pull it up on the screen here real quick. Kelsi shared with me some of the questions. I'm going to fast forward to the end of this because Kelsi shares this with her applicants. There's a list of like practice questions for your upcoming USRN interview, right? This is an amazing list of questions. How would you suggest utilizing this tool? Like, is it just a read through the questions, or how do you think it would be best implemented for our candidates to practice prior to their exam?
That's a great question. So there's a few different steps that I would take here, right? The first thing that I would recommend that you do is read through these questions and make sure you understand what the question is asking. If you feel like you can't read through these and understand what they are asking, interviewing might not be the right step for you right now, and that's okay. Maybe you need a little bit more time to practice and understand. If you read through these and you're like, yeah, I understand the questions, that makes sense, then I would recommend maybe writing out your responses to these answers, or at least some bullet points so that you have an idea. The next step from that point would be to practice these questions with someone. So maybe you have a friend or a colleague that speaks English at the same level, or maybe a little bit higher than you. Or maybe you are working with one of our recruiters and you want to set up some time with your recruiter so they can help you practice these questions. Either of those are great options. And then in that situation, I would recommend having your friend or colleague or your worldwide recruiter ask you these questions. You give your response, and then that person can say, that was great, or maybe you should rephrase this part or say this part a little bit differently. All of those steps can help you feel really prepared for your interview. Now, one thing that I want to point out is that sometimes people kind of maybe think, well, I'll write out all my answers to these questions. I know they're going to be great answers. Then I'll go into my interview and I can just read my answers because I know that I'll feel confident and prepared, which I understand. Like, you are nervous. You want to make sure that you say the right thing. But most of our interviews really don't like it if you are reading your answers off of a sheet of paper. What they want it to feel like is a conversation, just like me and Kari are having with you now, where we suggest ideas, we ask questions, and then we answer them. So it's really important to not just read your answers off of a piece of paper, but to be able to feel confident in expressing your answers and how you feel about these things, and being able to answer those questions as they're being asked. The other thing that I would advise against if you try to write out all your answers in advance is that sometimes they ask a question that might not be on this list that I gave you in advance. We don't always know exactly what question's going to be asked. And so if they ask a question that you didn't write down an answer to, you might feel unprepared or not ready to answer the question. And so that's why I recommend doing some practicing of these answers, practicing of what you really want to say in an interview, so that when it comes time for you to interview, you feel comfortable having a casual conversation about these topics.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with you, Kelsi, in that writing and scripting your response is, yes, it's good beforehand, but when you go into the interview, try to have just bullet points there, because there's a big difference in someone reading something to you and someone genuinely responding to your question. And it's very easy to spot the difference.
Absolutely. We've had lots of interviewers come back and say, well, I'm concerned because this person was reading their answers in their interview. And it might just be that you were nervous. You didn't feel confident enough. You do have the skills, but it makes the interviewer feel like, well, maybe this person isn't ready or isn't equipped to come to the US and work in an English speaking environment. And so I really advise that you work on your questions. And Joyce, I see your question about the letters being tiny. Don't worry. You can email your recruiter anytime and we'll send this resource to you. We'll even put my email in the chat and you can email me. I'll send it to you directly. We just have this as an example and we can talk through you about some of the questions that we recommend.
Yeah, if you want to, if you're watching on a phone, you can also screenshot and zoom in. But yeah, when I made this, I tried to zoom it in and it just didn't go over so well. But again, these are just examples for you guys to see. But thank you for letting us know that, Joyce. I think that you're exactly right, that you script your responses. Bullet points are definitely the best. The other thing, I love the tip that you gave about actually practicing with someone and getting that just comfort of speaking in English with someone else. I know that it's kind of been brought to our attention, and CJ last week pointed out that in the Philippines and that culture, it can be very judgmental. You're very judging of each other's English ability. But you've just got to overcome that, because when you come to the United States, it's going to be English. And hospitals, a majority of our clients have the requirement that you are speaking English the entire time that you are working. Like even like in the break room, the only time I heard this from a client, the only time a nurse is actually allowed to speak in their native language is if it's just the two, you and someone else from your country in the break room. If it's just the two of you, as soon as someone else comes in, if they are not from your country and don't know your language, you have to transition over to English. Yeah. And that's just a comfort level thing. If you can think back to maybe when you didn't understand English and you heard someone speak, think about if you've traveled to another country and you hear someone speaking their native language and you have no idea what they're saying. I don't know about you, Kelsi, but I get very self-conscious and I'm like, oh my gosh, like they're talking about me, when they're probably talking about everything else but me. But you immediately feel self-conscious. So it's not to discriminate against you and your country and your beautiful language. It's to provide the best patient care. And in order to do that, the patients and all of the people working in the hospital have to feel comfortable. And that includes the other nurses that you're working with.
Absolutely.
So it's very important.
Yeah. Now, if you don't have an opportunity to practice with a friend, or maybe you just don't know somebody that you can, I would recommend watching some of Kari's previous videos. There's some really great resources on YouTube, but there's also a few other things that you can do in your interview to be confident, to speak well. One of those is to speak slowly. Sometimes we get nervous, we speak too fast. And so I recommend slowing down a little bit so that you can understand each other. If you don't understand a question that's being asked of you, it's totally okay to say, hey, could you repeat that question for me? And then the interviewer will repeat themselves so that you have a chance to understand the question. The other thing is don't interrupt the interviewer. Let them finish their question, and that helps them to see that you fully understand and appreciate their time. Also, stay on topic with the questions that are being asked. And finally, keep your camera on. I know sometimes you might be nervous about having your face on the camera, but one of the things that helps is being able to see somebody's lips as they're talking and understanding each other in that way. So it's the voice and the visual of being able to see you talk. So having your camera on in an interview can really help the interviewer understand you better.
Absolutely. Do you ever, or do interviewers ever say, if a candidate is interviewing and their camera is off, can the interviewer ask, can you please turn your camera on?
Yeah, they can. And sometimes there's a connection issue and you do have to turn your camera off just so that you can hear each other better. But I would say the majority of our interviews, they prefer that you have the camera on. This also gives them a chance to see you, to see how professional you are. It's why we recommend dressing professionally for your interviews. And it really gives you a chance to connect with the interviewer. It's really hard to make a connection with someone when it's just your voices coming across. But when, like me and Kari, are able to see each other right now and you guys are able to see us, you're developing trust and a relationship with that person by having your camera on.
Absolutely. So what is your advice to candidates if they are asked a question in their interview and they don't understand the question? What do they do in that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's totally okay to say, hey, I'm a little confused on that question. Could you repeat the question? Or you could say, could you repeat that question in a different way? Maybe it's just the way that they worded it that you didn't understand. Or you can say, could you repeat that question a little bit more slowly? And that would give you a chance to hear the question again and come up with your response. Sometimes you might be with an interviewer that has a really strong accent from some part of the US that is harder for you to understand. Someone that's a native US speaker might be able to say, like, okay, I understand what they're saying, but if you've never heard that accent before, it might be harder to understand. And that is one of the reasons we have a really great team of interview facilitators. If you've interviewed with us before, you've met these facilitators. They are the people that are working with you on the day of the interview, sending you the Zoom link, getting you into the Zoom room, making sure you feel comfortable. And sometimes they'll even be able to pop on and say, hey, here's what they were trying to ask, or here's what they're trying to say, if you guys are having a hard time understanding each other. So don't worry, you're not by yourself in that interview room. We have a dedicated team member from WorldWide that's there assisting you as well.
That is really, really cool. I didn't even know that, that we had somebody in there facilitating, which that's why it's also important to do as much pre-work as you possibly can, watching movies from different locations, watching even cartoons with your kids with different characters that have different accents. It can be difficult to understand those movies just because of a Southern accent or an Australian accent, or within the United States, people from Boston, I have no clue what they say half the time. And I, as a native speaker, have to be like, I'm sorry, what? But if I go up there, they're like, excuse me? They don't understand me either. So, and we're all in the United States. So not understanding an accent is 100% acceptable. And like Kelsi said, ask for clarification. Or you on your end can say, I think this is what you're asking me. You can kind of rephrase the question to them and say, is this what you're asking me? And they'll tell you yes or no, and they'll rephrase the question for you. So that's also an option too, if you don't understand the question. What do you do? So let's say that you've gone through the interview and they don't give you an offer because they're concerned about the language. What do you do in that situation?
So this can be a really disappointing reason to not get an interview, right? You feel like you prepared well, you felt like your skills were good, and your recruiter says, hey, they just had a hard time understanding you. They don't feel like you'd be a good fit at this time. It can be really disappointing, and that's okay. It's okay to feel disappointed by that response, but don't let it hinder you from moving forward. It's not going to disqualify you from working with us in the future. We still want to be able to assist you. It just might take a little bit more time before you're able to interview again. I really recommend doubling down on your interview preparedness. So find somebody to practice with if you haven't already. Start watching those shows in English so that you can understand. Join Kari every week. Even just hearing somebody else speak in English and having a chance to engage is really going to help your skills. And then also talk with your recruiter. It's okay to tell them, man, I'm really disappointed by this news. What can I do to prepare differently next time? Or how can I prepare better? I've had nurses that I've worked with personally that have not gotten an interview because of language concerns, and I've continued to work with them. I've offered to meet with them to just have conversation back and forth, and that might not be something your recruiter can always do, but we can also say, like, hey, here's some YouTube videos or some tools, or maybe even an app that we recommend to help you practice your skills. And you'll have another chance. You might not be able to interview again with that exact hospital. So if it's the hospital that you're really excited about, that's your only choice, the one that you really want, it's super crucial to practice ahead of time, because most of the time you're only going to get one shot with that particular hospital. So if you don't feel confident and ready to interview, it's okay to say, you know what? I'm not ready. I need a little bit more time. But don't worry, we'll continue to work with you throughout the process.
That is awesome. That's a really, really great tip that, it's that first impression kind of thing, right? Is having a solid first impression. And that's what, it's the same advice that I'm giving candidates too, Kelsi, is for a majority of you, it's the speaking. Like speaking is your biggest struggle. And I hear people all the time talk about how they don't have anyone to practice with, or they don't feel confident practicing. I am here to tell you right now, when I have an interview or if I have a job interview, or I grew up doing pageants and I would prepare for pageants, I would talk to myself. I mean, I really would. I would have so many conversations with myself. I would ask myself practice questions and I would verbalize them. It's one thing to think it in your head, but to actually verbalize it and say it out loud, because sometimes something sounds good in your head and then you say it out loud and you're like, hold up, that does not sound very good.
Right.
I cannot emphasize enough speaking, even by yourself. Grab your phone, record yourself speaking. I know you feel silly. I know you're like, this is the weirdest thing, but we are now in a generation where we're recording ourselves all the time, right? All the time. It's the generation of Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook. Like, you've always got a phone in your face. Use it for good.
Yeah.
Use it for good.
One thing that I've personally done, I've worked to learn some new languages in the past. And one thing that you can do that's super practical is go into your app settings, whether you're watching on Facebook, let's say you watch, Facebook Reels or Instagram Reels, or if you watch TikTok like I do, go into your settings and you can change your settings to show you videos in a specific language. So I was trying to learn French and I could change my videos to be in French or even in French subtitles. And then they will show you videos that are in that language. And so just listening to content that you would normally be listening to anyways in a different language, you'll start to pick words up. You'll be like, oh, that sounds familiar. Or because of the context of the video, like I love watching cooking videos, you can see like, oh, they're talking about this ingredient. That's the word that they're talking about. And so even that simple switch on your own social media platforms can really help as well.
Absolutely. That's a definite pro tip right there. You could also watch a show that for me, there are two shows that I have watched on repeat over and over and over and over again. I could probably quote them from beginning to end. Same thing. If there's a movie that you watch, they have now with technology, you can now watch that movie in a different language. So if you know the movie, you know the words that they're saying, hear it in that other language. Or like Kelsi said, even look at the subtitles in that other language. That's huge. That's absolutely huge. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of listening skills in your interview, because is this true that I know in the interviews I've been in, but I've never been in a nursing interview, do interviewers ask kind of multiple questions within one question? Does that happen a lot?
One question that is asked, I would say almost in every single interview that we have, that's kind of a 2-in-1 question, is tell me about the most difficult patient or patient family member that you've experienced. What was the situation and how did you handle it? Now that question has like 3 questions in one and can be complicated, but try breaking it down. So what's the most difficult patient or patient family member? So you get to kind of pick one of those areas. And then what was the situation and how did you handle it? And so with this type of question, this is a chance for you to tell a story or an example of something that happened from your own career as a nurse. And so walking through that question, what was the situation? So talk about the situation. How did you handle it? What tools did you use to handle it? And that will work well. Another question that's asked almost in every interview, this is almost the first question that they ask, is tell me about yourself and your nursing experience. And this is a really broad question. You could talk about anything here. You could talk about what you do in your free time or where you went to school, but narrowing it down to your nursing experience, where you're currently working, what units you work in, what patients that you handle, those types of things are really going to take the conversation in the direction that you want it to go. Now, if you aren't sure how to answer that question, or you're like, well, should I talk about this? Or maybe I should talk about this. Ask your recruiter. Your recruiter's seen these interviews 100 times. Ask your facilitator. They've seen it even more than your recruiter has, and they'd be happy to give you some tips and tricks on what to say or what not to say. You can also check out our YouTube channel. I did a webinar last year about how to prepare for your interview and gave some really practical advice on how to answer some of these questions.
Absolutely. When they ask you those questions, like, yes, they do. My advice, if they ask me that question, if I was a nurse, I would give one kind of fun fact about myself, or like really important thing, like I love skydiving, or something like that. In my free time, I enjoy skydiving. However, as a nurse, blah, 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 blah. Because what are they interviewing for? a nursing position. Like they're not interviewing you for your life outside of the hospital. They're interviewing you for what you can contribute inside of the hospital. So as fun and great as your life is, and like, I love the way that you put that, Kelsi, like you drive the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You can steer the conversation with your answers.
Right.
So this is your chance to brag on yourself and highlight, look at all the cool crap I've done as a nurse, man. Like I've done all these things. So use this as an opportunity. I know that a lot of the cultures around the world, we're very humble people, but an interview is the opportunity to talk about yourself and to talk about how awesome you are.
Yeah, absolutely. This is your chance to really show your experience and show your worth. And I've seen interviews before where someone has said, well, you know, I've done these units and I've worked with these types of patients. And the interviewer said, well, I don't feel like they really want this opportunity or they're really interested in this opportunity. And that might just be because you didn't show them how passionate you are about nursing. And I know every single one of you on this call, this is your career. This is what you love, and it's exhausting and it's tiring, but you show up every day because you love being a nurse, and that's what the interviewer wants to see. And so being able to talk about that and really show your passion for the work that you do is going to be the most important part of your interview every single time.
I would say kind of, I'll give one more pro tip and then Kelsi will give one more pro tip. And if you guys have any questions, please pop them in the chat, put them in the chat. We are happy to answer those questions. You guys know it doesn't have to be. Kelsi knows a lot about the entire process as well. So any questions you guys have about from interview to all the way to the end, please feel free to ask those questions in the chat. But I guess my final pro tip would be inspired by what Kelsi just said. Do research on the hospital beforehand. Like know the hospital, every hospital has its own set of core values that they strive to provide in regards to patient care. Know that hospital's core values and be able to talk about how they align with your core values. Like that's a great way to integrate into a question. Be like, I noticed that one of your core values, Johns Hopkins, is blah, 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 blah. Well, this closely aligns with how I practice as a nurse because I blah, 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 blah. So being able to show that that's another way that you can just show like, I really want this job. Like I've done a lot of research here. Pick me.
Absolutely. I will say that I've seen so many interviewers come back to us and say, you know, that candidate, they actually looked up our hospital and they actually did research about the hospital. That was so impressive to me. And you might think, well, yeah, of course you would do that. That sounds normal. But that is something that is like, it can really set you apart from the rest of the nurses that are interviewing on that day. My final pro tip is when you're interviewing, make sure you're in an environment that is free of distractions and loud noises. I know this can be challenging, especially if you're interviewing maybe on your break at work, you have kids at home, maybe you're in a public space like a cafe or something like that trying to interview. But if they can't hear what you're saying, they're not going to be able to offer you a job because they're just not able to hear about what you love, about nursing, about your skills. And so make sure, even if it's just for that 30-minute period, you lock yourself in a closet somewhere, you ask somebody if you can borrow their office or their room, try to get in a quiet space so that they're able to hear and understand you well. Because like I mentioned, most of the time, this is your one shot with that particular hospital. And you want to make sure that you do everything possible to make that career opportunity happen for you.
Absolutely. So Mohammed has recommended, I think Tracy's right, the Duolingo app. That's a really fun app. It's an engaging app and it's very good for speaking. There are a lot of speaking practice opportunities on that app. And it's great if you're immigrating with children. Yes. Duolingo is fantastic for children. So if you're looking for a great app, and I use the free version, my daughter is 10 and she uses the free version and she loves it, like absolutely loves it. So it's wonderful. Here's a great question, Kelsi. Is it important to prepare a flashy CV?
Good question. So something that is important to know is that CVs from around the world can all look a little bit different. Many countries want you to have a photo on your resume, or they want you to have personal information like maybe your height or weight or your father's name or your father's career. Those are not common things that are on a resume here in the US. So having those pieces of personal information, your religion, where you were born, things like that are not things you should have on your resume in the US. And that's because we have a lot of laws that create protection for you so that there's not any choices made off of discrimination. So when preparing your resume, make sure it's work focused. You can have your email, your phone number, where you live, but other than that, don't put any personal information on there. It's okay to have some bright colors on your resume, but the most important thing is that all of your experience is listed. The large majority of our hospitals and facilities are basing your salary off of your amount of experience. And so if you're focused on this list of certifications that you have, but you miss 2 or 3 years of experience from back in, 2010 to 2012, you're not going to get a salary based off of that experience. And so my recommendation is putting all of your experience on your resume, listing the types of patients and the types of experience that you have. If you're unsure about what your resume should look like, we have a great resume template I'd be happy to send you. Maybe Tracy can drop my email address in the chat. If you need that, I'm happy to send it to you. I can be reached at krobinson@healthstaff.org. Or if you have a question or need something else, I'm happy to take any concerns. I do see a question about nursing assistant recruitment. We have recruited nursing assistants in the past. Right now, we don't have any nursing assistant positions active, but you're always welcome to apply on our website. We'll get you in the queue. We'll make sure that your application is seen. And if we do have positions come up, we would be happy to let you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that nursing assistant list is quite extensive. There's just not, it's the nursing immigration process is just so long compared to the RN process. So what's your final statement on a photo on the resume? Should you or should you not include a photo on the resume?
I would say personally, I would say not to. It's not common in the US to have a photo on your resume. I would say remove it. If you want to have it on there, it's not going to disqualify you from a job. But personally, I would say take the photo off your resume. Instead, use that space to talk about your skills and qualifications.
So basically stick to your name, your address.
Yep. Email address.
Email address, and telephone number.
Yep.
And then other than that, that's the only personal information you need to give. I love that I had never really thought about that, but I've looked at many resumes where they put, oh my gosh, if they asked me for like my height and weight, I'd be like, no, I'm not working there. You do not need to know that information. That is on a need to know basis between me and my doctor.
One thing that's super important to have on your resume is your NCLEX information. You don't have to put your license number, but at least putting the state that you got your license in and the date that you passed the NCLEX is super important. This will help your recruiter to be able to make sure that you do have your NCLEX. And I saw another question about the email address. It's in the chat, but it's krobinson@healthstaff.org.
Yeah, really important on your resume because there is a difference. In some states, you can just take the NCLEX, like you can register to take the NCLEX through pretty much any state, but not every state will issue a license without a social security number. So it is very, very, very important on your resume to distinguish between have you taken just the NCLEX and what state did you take the NCLEX through? And then also, do you have a nursing license? Right. Because just because you took the NCLEX does not mean you have a nursing license as well. Right. So very, very important that you distinguish between those two on your resume. And like Kelsi said, really on the resume after your personal information, I would do education. Where were you educated? I don't think that I've seen some resumes put like GPA on there and all that. Do you think that's important, Kelsi?
No, we really just want to see what school you went to, what degree. So was it a diploma, an associate's? Do you have your BSc or do you have your BSN? Or maybe you even have a master's degree in nursing. That's what we want to see. And then the years. So the start and end year for each of your degrees. Many employers have differentials. If you have a master's degree, you might make a little bit more. And so making sure that you have that there is going to be super important for your CV.
And some employers require a bachelor's degree, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I would say the majority of them will accept a diploma, typically a 3-year diploma, but bachelor's degree is most likely preferred. But don't worry, you're not disqualified if you have a 3-year diploma instead. We absolutely can continue to work with you. People with associates, 2-year, 3-year, or a BSN are eligible to take the NCLEX based on where you were educated. You can always find more information on the NCLEX website as well.
Absolutely. That's Pearson View, the Pearson View. We've got, of course, we love our nurse assistants. We love the nurse aid assistants, and we are so appreciative of you. And we, of course, welcome you to apply. But as Kelsi stated earlier, we do not currently have any openings, or we're not interviewing for those positions at the moment. Yeah. So, but again, you're welcome to apply. We just don't hold your breath for an interview in the coming weeks. It's probably the safest way to say that. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions. We had some really great questions earlier. A friendly reminder from Tracy: if you've already applied and accepted a job offer, you can request to enroll in our free English courses, where I will help you prepare for your English exam. I'm happy to do that. And as Kelsi said, tuning into Kari's Corner is also considered English exam or English language practice. Always considered English language practice. So thank you guys so much. Thank you to Kelsi. Kelsi, you are absolutely amazing. I now have to come over to your house and check out your books, like your color coordinated book wall in person. It's absolutely beautiful. But thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Thank you for your great questions. Hopefully you found this information helpful. I always learn something from Kelsi, so I'm sure that you guys learned something from Kelsi today. But if you have questions, Kelsi put her email in the chat, or Tracy put the email in the chat for Kelsi. You can also reach out to me, or we have our just general inquiries on healthstaff.org on our website. So make sure you check out our webinar next week with our featured state of Tennessee. And other than that, don't face the corner, face the world with WorldWide.